we have started training for IAS preliminary examinations. We got some fantastic team, and it will be over a period of 9 months happening at MMA Management Center. You also get the membership of MMA. Plus, at the end of the course, you will pass, of course, IAS because you're doing a training at MMA. You also get a diploma in management from MMA because after all, 9 months we are teaching you management and IAS subject. We thought we must give you a degree. I mean, not a degree, it's a diploma from management. So if you have any of your friends, and since being a not-for-profit charitable institution, we charge almost 60% cheaper than what the market did with the value added so many programs. Idea is we really wanted to help out so many people who cannot afford to pay huge sum for this, and also would like to do something and pass IAS exam. If you're not able to do that, at least you get a diploma in management, which will help you to some extent for the value for money what you have paid. Then there are a number of other initiatives that have been put in place by MMA. Please do come and watch it, and you will see over a period what's happening. Next event is happening on 23rd of May. Read and Grow. What got you here won't get you there. This again, we have got an outstanding panel. Sangeeta Sumesh, Subha Kumar, and Venu Prasad Manan will be talking about this book. And we do more for management students. Large number of students attend this program, both online and offline, because we strongly believe if you're not a great leader, to be a great leader, to be a great reader. So please make sure you attend and also come and use your library. We got some phenomenal books lined up in the library, including ebooks. Plus 1.25 million research papers are there. Thousands of plus videos are there. Please come. It's all meant for your use. Then we also have on the 5th of June, we'll be celebrating the World Earth Day. We'll be talking on the subject, fighting desertification and building resilience. We have an outstanding panel to come and speak because the subject which very, very important for each one of us, what we leave it behind for our future generations is very important. Earth is very important. And so many mind-blowing data, you will get it. Then you will know that how much we are misusing. Then on 7th of June, again, interesting event, Embrace the Future, the Soft Science of Business Transformation. We got, again, outstanding panel, Mr. R. Sheshai, Chairman, Asian Paint Limited, R. Gopalakrishnan, former corporate advisor and former executive director of Tata Sons. And also we have Arish Bhattacharya, author, management consultant, teacher, and former senior vice president, Unilever. So really outstandingly listen to the people. You'll really, it'll be a great opportunity for you to come and interact. All these events, what I'm telling is all happening in person. And on 17th June, we're also having an excellent insights on navigating change, emerging trends in real estate regulations and its impact on the industry. So I see a lot of changes happening in real estate industry. Valuation, guidelines value, joint development, not joint development, how to develop yourself, how to connect with various RERA. We're trying to get some head of RERA with then outstanding speakers, including from Sharadul Amach and Arti, and a panel of speakers will come because it's always good to know what's happening in real estate industry. Even if you don't want to build the industry, you get to know so that you share this information with your colleagues and friends. Plus, you also know how to maintain the property what already have actually. If you're giving it for rent, you should also find a way and means you get the house what you get for rent back actually. Many a time you don't get it back, but better to keep the provisions are so wonderful nowadays. Modified rules. If you do it properly, you will get the house back. I know MR is laughing at it, but it's true. You proper documented resistance, I think you can get your house back. The rules are quite clear nowadays. You do the registration, there's a lot of procedure. They'll come and tell you. I think we urge upon you to do that. Then on 5th of July, our flagship event. MMA Award for Managerial Excellence and 68th Annual General Meeting. We showcase what we have done over the year. We've done fairly well. 14 times we won the award and many more for financial performance have been very well. And we got two outstanding speaker. Chief guest is Narendran, Managing Director of Tata Steel is going to be the chief guest. Then we also have Josh is going to be talking to us, keynote address. Again, it's a great event. Look forward to seeing you. This is what happening now. Coming to today's event. Electoral reforms, Bane or Boon. This is a subject I don't want to talk to you. You all in the midst of election. So many news we hear. So many news come in the newspaper. So many news in the WhatsApp. So many things. We don't know what to believe, what not to believe. But we have got an outstanding panel today to talk to us what exactly the people who have done quite a bit of work on this line. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hand together to welcome the distinguished, very high-profile panel for this evening. Mr. C.S. Krishnamurthy, former Chief Election Commissioner of India. Professor Dr. Trilokhan Shastri, former Dean of Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, Chairman of Association of Democratic Reforms, and Mr. M.R. Venkatesh, Advocate, Supreme Court of India, and also we have Mr. Satyamurthy, Convener of Pulse Matter. I request the dignitaries to please take your place on the dais, sir. I also welcome Tilakam Shastri who joined us online from Bangalore. Come, sir. My proud privilege to welcome all the viewers watching the program live from all the channels. And today onwards, we are trying a new experiment. We are trying, because we want to really showcase how many people are really watching it online live. YouTube, I think it will flash on the screen how many people are watching it. The numbers, you will know what watching. Similarly, our friend. So I want to showcase a large number of people are watching this program live. So it makes us very, very proud to really bring some outstanding. I think your support make us achieve all this. And also, viewers watching the program live from all over the world. And as usual, if you have any questions, the numbers flash on the screen. Please send all your questions, and the speakers, including Dr. Tilakam Shastri, has kindly agreed to respond to all your questions this evening. And only I request you, keep the questions relevant to the theme, what you are going to be discussing. And the format of the program this evening, we'll request Mr. Professor Tilakam Shastri to share his insight for 20-25 minutes, followed by Mr. Krishnamurthy will share his insight, then followed by Venkatesh. Then we'll have a Q&A. As usual, if you have any questions, question slips and pen are available. And please write your question, give it to us. Due to the time, we want to manage time. That's the reason we insist on question slips. And I found where you can do only 2 questions in 5 minutes, we could do almost 4 to 5 questions because there's no people taking onto the mic. It takes a lot of time. Now, Satyamurthy is our partner for this event. The policy matter is always, we work together. We do a lot of great events. Satyamurthy is a seasoned policy analyst and political commentator. He specializes in Indian southern neighbors, particularly Maldives, Sri Lanka, and he's also former ORF, and he'll be delivering opening remarks. And I also acknowledge the presence of Mr. Mali, President of MMA, and a warm welcome to you, sir. And Mr. Rajaram IAS, who is also judge of Lokayukta, well-wisher of MMA, Mr. Sundaram, and many more well-wishers are here. Once again, warm welcome to each one of you, all the guests. I now request Satyamurthy to give opening remarks. You want to sit there and read?
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Team MMA. Today's topic, I think, is a perennial topic. From my school days on, I have heard it in some form or other. If you look at even our constitutional scheme of elections, that by itself was some kind of an electoral reform. But I started hearing about in specific terms during the emergency. I do not know how many of you have heard about first 42nd Amendment draft and the second Constitutional Amendment draft. Both of them did not carry the name of the author or whoever was circulating. There was an indication for a presidential form of government at that time. But when it was introduced in Parliament and otherwise, it was not there. Then, as some of you may again recall, in the late 90s, again the government of the time flew a kite on presidential form. It took different turns because of different reasons. Because the ruling party of the time lost elections in the Hindi belt, which it thought it could sweep. It did not happen. So that's a different thing altogether. But electoral reforms proper, as we know now and accept now, again happened in that decade. In the sense, in the implementation of the existing norms, rules, with that, without the support of the Supreme Court, etc. From then on, we have been having some kind of a steady progress in the implementation of electoral laws and rules. But reforms or electoral reforms are something slightly more than that and exactly maybe even different from that. What are they? For instance, today we have this one nation, one poll initiative of this government. Is it right, good, bad, ugly, or whatever. For a nation like India, that's a feral state. Is it implementable, enforceable? Should it be at that cost? From Panchayat election up to the presidential poll or parliamentary polls at least, should we have a formulation? For instance, as Vijay Kumar said, I study Sri Lanka also. Sri Lanka, there is already a situation where political parties are saying, whoever wins the presidential election sees parliamentary election. Because there is a direct presidential election as in the US. So they said, we don't want that. In this time, they have the presidential election later this year. And so some of the political parties supporting the government want parliamentary election early. Right? Wherever presidential elections are there in our neighborhood, particularly, for instance, in Maldives first, the president came. He swept the parliamentary poll also. So, whether it is good, bad, we have to decide. We are going to discuss it today. Then, what are the other forms of electoral reforms issues that are on the table? I, for one, strongly feel, request my panelists to address one issue. The kind of implementation of the rules as we have now, is it good for democracy or not? I, for one, feel this reducing the days for campaigning, reducing the daily hours for campaigning has only contributed or led to the dictatorship of party leaderships, personality cult, more than earlier, and the symbols. See, Tamil Nadu, for instance, we had the Lok Sabha election, campaigning day was just 19 days. Right? So whichever party, the candidate just doesn't have. It is utterly ridiculous to imagine a candidate to go across a constituency of 6 assembly segments with about 15 to 20 lakh voters and at least show his face to 20-25% of the. We are not living in a society of the 80s or 90s. Today, in every village, every town, every household, both men and women, everyone is out of the house during working hours. Both men and women are working, all children, including the poorest of the poor family, they are going to school, colleges. Whom does that candidate come and look up? And by 10 p.m., they are back at home, say around 6-7 p.m. By 10 p.m., the cabinet has to close. Which means, and the party decides only at the last minute. Which means, whichever party, the leader's name sells or doesn't sell, the party symbol alone is known to the voter. Just I want you to think, I don't want you to answer. How many of you know who is your MLA? Who is your MP? MP may be Madras City. Voters who may know, all of us, at least in this room. I don't think many of us know who is our MLA. Not for any fault of his. Because we voted for a party. Voted for a symbol. Not for a candidate. In such a situation, what about independents? Do they even stand a present chance of getting to know? Yes, there are independents who are contesting for a totally different unethical reasons maybe. But honest candidates, even those unethical candidates, have a right to be seen and heard by the voter. So apart from the whatever, we haven't restricted the agenda for the individual speaker, they can speak whatever they have in mind. But I would also be happy if some of you at least can address this kind of queries. How this system has been working in the last 25 years. That is constantly under review and constantly being mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Satyamurthy, for setting the context. Before I call upon the distinguished speakers, let me briefly introduce our distinguished speakers for this evening. C.S. Krishnamurthy, the former Chief Election Commissioner of India, is renowned overseeing 2004 Lok Sabha elections. He began his career in government and rising to the service as a Secretary to the Government of India, Secretary to the Department of Company Affairs. Krishnamurthy contributes include establishment of Investors Education and Protection Fund, and he is also served as the IMF advisor and conducted elections for the Board of Control of Cricket India, which must have been a quite interesting event. And post-retirement, he remains active as a board member for various organizations, NGOs, a number of things. Very warm welcome to you, Krishnamurthy. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Let me also welcome Professor Tirlochan Sastry, former Dean, Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, and Chairman of Association of Department of Democratic Reform. He joined us online from Bangalore and Democratic Reform and Right to Information. He's also very key figure in Right to Information campaign with a diverse academic background, including PhD, MIT, USA, expertise span, supply chain management, social entrepreneurship, and good governance, recognized for his civil society. Has received awards like CNN IBN Indian of the Year, Distinguished Alumni Award, IIT. Very warm welcome to you, Mr. Tirlochan sir. You talk about election, I think the speech goes off, I know it. Mr. M.R. Venkatesh, advisor, Supreme Court of India. Mr. M.R., very, very popularly known. Many people watched him on television. Advocate at Supreme Court of India, specializes in criminal and financial law, particularly anti-money laundering regulations. As a designated partner of Agastya Legal LLP, he leads litigation and advisory services on various acts, including PMLA, Prevention of Corruption Act, and Income Tax Act. With a background of chartered accountancy and PhD in economics, he is visiting faculty of numerous institutions and an author of several books on economics, legal. Additionally, he is also a prominent panelist of national television, respected columnist in the Indian media. Ladies and gentlemen, what a high panel we have today, and welcome. Now I request Professor Tirlochan Sastry to share his insight. Can you have the PPT also?
Thank you. Thank you, Group Captain. Can you hear us? Can you hear me? Am I audible? You can hear me? Okay. First of all,
Twice, sir. Quite clear, sir. Very clear.
Okay. Apologies for not being able to come in person. It's a very busy time. And it's a great honor to be back at MMA and to share a panel with such a distinguished fellow panelists like Mr. T.S. Krishnamurthy and Mr. Venkatesh. So, a few introductory remarks. Whatever I have to say is from a limited voter and citizen perspective. I think Mr. Krishnamurthy will have a much larger and wider perspective from the Election Commission, and Mr. Venkatesh from the legal perspective. This is entirely based on a citizen perspective. Can we go to the next slide, please? Can we go to the next slide, please? Hello?
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, while we're sorting it out, so why do we need electoral reforms and who will bring in these reforms? These are two questions that I will try to address. And world over, there are a few issues that plague elections. Mr. Satyamurthy flagged some very meta questions like what kind of a system, presidential system, etc. If time permits during Q&A, we'll address that. But right now, operational details. Overuse of money. I think people don't understand that money not only is important, but it vitiates democracy. Those who spend crores and crores to win elections, they are not doing it for public service. Once they have won the election, their first priority is to recover that investment of so many crores that they have spent. So there has to be some regulation, something has to be done about the overuse of money. There is an official limit of 95 lakhs now per MP constituency, but in reality, we hear all kinds of figures, 2 crores, 5 crores, 20 crores in urban constituency, etc. So this huge amount of money is vitiating democracy. Now, an old disease which had been corrected by the Election Commission is coming back in a white collar form, which is various ways of rigging elections. Voter enrollment, we keep on hearing of problems all over the country about names being struck off or names not being added, and various tricks being used to prevent people from voting, including strong arm tactics, false votes, stuffing of ballots. I don't want to get into operation details, but even with the EVMs, I'm not saying the EVMs are tampered with, but there are some obvious ways of making sure that somebody's vote, if you don't press that button, the guy at the booth doesn't press the button, the vote will not be recorded. But his name is there, signed as a voter. Later on, somebody can vote on his behalf. Problems in counting, etc. And one thing which is very clear in the last 4 or 5 years, and including now, is the misuse of social media to spread the fake news, lies, hate, and fear. So the social media giants like Facebook and WhatsApp, they say that India tops the world in hate speech. And this, of course, goes up considerably during the elections. So these are some operational issues which are not only spoiling democracy, but sometimes vitiating the social atmosphere as well. So shall we go on, please? Can we go to the next slide? So these are some operational issues that we see. We have been working for 20 odd years that we see. Now, India, according to various estimates, we can dispute those estimates, spent more money in the Lok Sabha 2019 elections than the US presidential elections. America's economy is huge compared to India, and still we have ended up spending so much money on election. This is not what the election commission spends. This is what the candidates and political parties spend. And world over, this concern of capture of government by big money continues. So there are some measures, we can discuss that if there are Q&A. But basically, transparency and limiting the amount that a individual or a corporate can donate to a political party. There is a peculiar Indian issue, which is the rise in members of parliament and MLAs with criminal cases. And in India, it is identity-based politics, caste, religion, language, and region-based identity politics, which the political leaders use, unfortunately, use and overuse during elections, further seeming to divide the society. I've already mentioned that India stops in the hate speech list. And there is another phenomena which we have not as a society taken full cognizance of. You know, when I used to come to Chennai, the taxi drivers used to only speak in Tamil. Yanako konjam konjam Tamil, konjama, I only know a little bit. But now they will speak to me in Hindi. Saab, taxi chahiye, kahan jaane ka hai? The point is that the number of migrant workers all over India has reached 30 crores to 45 crores. So as an anecdote, the chap sitting outside IIM Bangalore where I teach, he sells tea and pan and cigarettes and all. I asked him, he's from West Bengal. He's been here for 20 years. He's not going back to vote. Bangalore is full of migrants from North India. Most of them are not going back to vote. So this is another phenomena which is increasing election after election. And we have not yet found a solution of dealing with this huge migrant. It is unprecedented. The number of migrant workers in India is more than the population of the US and more than the population of practically every country in the world except China and perhaps Brazil. So shall we go ahead, please? So before I get lost in details, the broad overview of remedies not only in India but around the world is transparency in funding. Everybody should know how much who gets what. Transparency in candidates and political parties. I'll elaborate on that later. Streamlining and foolproofing the actual elections. I think Mr. Krishnamurthy can really enlighten us on this. I will not say anything. And some methods to remove hate speech. We have not been able to actually handle this as yet. And the ultimate remedy, I'm saying from a voter's perspective, is aware, educated, engaged voters. So anecdotally, one politician from Kerala, he was asked, how come some of the north-based parties are not able to make an inroad into Kerala? And he said unwittingly or wittingly that, the population in Kerala is fully literate. Some of the political tricks that are played in the north do not work. So the point really is that we need an aware, educated, engaged voters. So let's continue, please. So on electoral reforms, our Association for Democratic Reforms was set up for electoral reforms. So my quick answer to the question, is it Bane or Boon? We think it is a boon, but it's up to you to decide. So the most recent electoral reform was our petition on electoral bonds. It was struck down as unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. Not only the Finance Act, but 4 subsidiary acts amendments were struck down. The Companies Act amendment was struck down. The RBI Act amendment was struck down. The amendment to the Representation of People Act was struck down, and the amendment to the Income Tax Act was struck down. So there is a long list of reforms. So this is just an example of a citizen or a civil society-led reform, which is the most dramatic in recent terms. So I'm going to run through over the next 5-10 minutes a long list of citizen-led reforms. The Election Commission will enlighten us on what they have done. So back in 2002 and 3, we had filed a petition in the Supreme Court asking that candidates must declare their financial and criminal records and make it mandatory. So after a long story, we won that case. The Supreme Court upheld it and made it a fundamental right of all of us sitting and and participating in this, and the whole citizens of all the citizens of the country. They said that when we exercise our vote, earlier we used to exercise vote by dropping a piece of paper, now I push a button. We are hereby expressing ourselves, and freedom of expression is a fundamental right under the Article 19 of the Constitution. And to properly exercise that fundamental right, the background information of candidates, financial and criminal and educational records should be made available. And in the 2003 State Election Commission conference, they decided to extend this to local bodies. Just for information, some people may not know, the Chief Election Commissioner presides over the elections of only the Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, and the State Assembly. The local elections are a separate constitutional body, state-wise, called the State Election Commission. So they have also in many states introduced this transparency in the candidate information. So can we go to the next slide, please? I'm going to start skipping because there were so many reforms that took place. A bill on electoral expenses was introduced, and the Election Commission further asked candidates to file expenses every 3 days during the campaign. See, the problem is bribing of voters, giving gifts, all sorts of things are taking place, and there is a close competition between the southern states, and perhaps Tamil Nadu wins hands down sometimes in terms of the money being distributed to voters, which is against the Representation of People Act. And it is actually a corrupt practice. So let me, in 2008, we again obtained a landmark ruling that the income tax returns of political parties would be made public. Many of you would be amazed to know, all of you are businessmen, you are from the Class Management Association. Each company has to have an internal auditor and external auditor, follow the best accounting practices, and make their balance sheets and audited statements publicly available, if it's a public listed company. Otherwise, it has to make it available to the income tax authorities and other regulatory authorities. The political parties, on the other hand, were not even auditing their statements. They were not using the latest information. Their accounts were in a mess. And we asked the CIC that it should be made public. And they were not willing to make their electoral funding or political party funding public. So this was a landmark ruling that we got back in 2008. All other countries had it, but we did not have it. All other countries mean so-called leading democracies in Europe and America. Can we go to the next slide, please? So as a result of all our work, we saw that the criminalization came down, but now we are back to square one and worse. So in 2008, the number of people with serious offences came down. In Rajasthan, Karnataka, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Delhi, Mizoram, the number of people with criminal cases had actually come down. By serious, IPC is the Indian Penal Code. By serious IPC count, we mean those cases which on conviction would lead to incarceration or jail sentence of 5 years or more, we count as serious cases. That also decreased temporarily. And then two major parties, the Congress and the BJP, they called for a consensus on barring candidates with criminal background. So shall we go ahead? So there were some marginal improvements. Yeah, let's go to the next slide, please. The Prime Minister then asked for the cabinet to disclose their asset details and avoid dealing with government property. So transparency. Details of assets of 30 Bihar ministers were uploaded in January 2011. All these things happened, but now we're backsliding. After a long RTI battle, information on the register of members' interest was made available. So in most countries, this issue of conflict of interest has been flagged. But in India, we don't. So you can be a member of parliament, be on various committees, and even enact laws or vote for laws where there is a conflict of interest. So that has been, some work has started on this. So I just wanted to flag that. So let's continue, please. So, now there is a huge debate about foreign funding of NGOs. Whether that is good or bad, I will not comment. But the law is very clear that political parties are banned from foreign funding. So we had won a case in the Delhi High Court saying that both the Congress and the BJP were guilty of foreign funding, and we won that case. Of course, they promptly appealed in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has not heard it for so many years. And so on and so forth. The June 2013 is very significant electoral reform. I just wanted to flag that. The Central Information Commission declared that the 6 national parties are public authorities. So we have a lawyer here, he will explain to us, but in layman terms, the public authority under RTI means that their information should be made public. But the political parties refused to comply with that order. We filed a petition in the Supreme Court. It is still hanging fire. So that's where we are. The Supreme Court said in 2013 again that sitting MPs and MLAs are barred from holding office on being convicted in a court of law. That means they immediately have to resign if they have been convicted by a court of law. There was this old thing that I have been convicted, but I have appealed to a higher court, so therefore I should allow it to continue. Supreme Court said, no, you are still convicted. Your jail sentence has been suspended. Your conviction has not been suspended. Unless the conviction is set aside, you are barred from holding public office as per the law, Representation of People Act. Let's continue, please. So these are all bit by bit. Then this famous case of Nota was laid down by the Supreme Court, none of the above. And the Supreme Court empowered the Election Commission to disqualify candidates for false election expenditure statements. So these are all small steps. So let's continue. Shall we continue, please? The Supreme Court asked candidates to declare sources of income of spouse and dependents. See, our analysis shows that repeat winners every 5 years or repeat candidates, both their income and their assets go up by several fold, double, triple, sometimes 5 times. So we wanted to know how it is happening, but the Income Tax Department refuses to take any action on investigating the source of increase of income. But the Supreme Court asked them that you please tell us where you are earning this money from. Just last year, we won a major case which the government has refused to uphold. We had asked the Supreme Court that the election commissioners should be appointed by a multi-person body. We had given various suggestions, but the Supreme Court held that the Prime Minister, the Chief Justice of India, and the leader of the largest opposition party, that 3-person committee would appoint the election commissioners. But the government introduced a bill saying that they dropped the Chief Justice of India and they put a Union Cabinet Minister. We have gone back to the court, but it has not yet come up for hearing. So it was blatantly against the directions of the Supreme Court. And as I mentioned, the electoral bond scheme was struck down. So can we continue, please? So these are all small. I just wanted to give you some measure of where we have failed. I take responsibility from ADR side that we have failed, but as a society also. So if you look at the Lok Sabha, over 3 elections, 2009, 14 and 2019, the percentage of people with serious criminal cases has gone up from 14 to 21 to 29%. And the total cases, that is serious and not so serious cases, has gone up from 30% to 34%, and the giant leap forward in 2019, which is 43% of our members of parliament have got some criminal case. So that's a failure. So we saw some, from 2004 to 8 when we started work, we saw some decline, but after that it has always been going up. Can we go to the next slide, please? This is another case which is pending in the Supreme Court. What about the cabinet? So we do analysis for state cabinets, national cabinet, etc. This is the central government union cabinet of India, the most powerful body, political body in the country. This is what it shows, that 17% of them had criminal cases in 2017, serious criminal cases, and in 2019 it has gone up to 29. So today we have the privilege of having a Lok Sabha with 43% criminal cases, 29% serious cases, and a union cabinet which at the time of swearing in, the cabinet reshuffles we have not followed, or I don't have the data with me readily, 29% with serious criminal cases and 39% with total cases. So the simple question is, how do we expect good governance or anything? It's all dependent on one charismatic leader or the other. But underneath that, this is the situation. And we have failed to address this adequately. We have gone to the court, several people have gone to the court, but the court has refused to budge and give any directions on this. Shall we continue, please? Yeah, so that is that. I will just close with a couple of comments based on Mr. Satyamurthy's opening remarks. You see, several commissions in India have gone into this issue of what is the right electoral system in India. We have a British type first past the post parliamentary system with indirect election of CM and the Prime Minister. In the US, you have the presidential system. In Europe, you have the proportional representative system. In France, you have a system where you have to get at least 50% of the vote cast to be a people's representative. If you don't get those 50%, there's a runoff election between the top two. So the Law Commission headed by Justice Jeevan Reddy, and much later the Working Committee to Review the Constitution headed by Justice M.N. Venkatachalaya, former Chief Justice of India, and the Election Commission and yet another Law Commission, they have all gone into these questions. They have given wonderful suggestions, but no government for the last 25, 50 years has acted on it. So there is no lack of wisdom, there is no lack of study. Most eminent people have actually gone into these questions of what kind of a system we need and given recommendations. I think it's only public pressure that may help us. So most people agree that the current system is not working well and we may have to change it. So that's what I wanted to say, Mr. Satyamurthy, to your opening question. So I will stop here. If I have exceeded my time, my apologies, and thank you for your patience.
Very good evening to all of you. I must thank Mr. Trilochan Shastri for his very exhaustive presentation of the electoral reforms, particularly the nature of reforms achieved through the Association for Democratic Reforms and the Supreme Court. Well, it's a good, successful story of an Association of Democratic Reform, having approached many of the
issues to the Supreme Court, having taken up to the Supreme Court. But I was a little surprised. He didn't mention it in his presentation. I thought I must mention it. Why ADR took up the EVM as an issue before the Supreme Court? I agree. People have their own reservations. I do agree there are different viewpoints, and certainly the opposition parties certainly can question the effectiveness of the EVMs. But I'll come to that little later. So I'll go to the general subject of the reforms itself. The subject given is that electoral reforms, whether it is a Bane or a Boon. In my opinion, I don't think there is any such need for a kind of a controversial, whether it is necessary or not. In my opinion, electoral reforms are absolutely necessary. What kind of a reforms we need? Of course, there can be a debate, discussion, and we can certainly have differences of opinion. But the country needs very urgently electoral reforms. I have no doubts about that. What is unfortunate is, if you look at the manifestos of most of the political parties, I would say almost all the political parties, until probably this particular election, they never ever touched the need for electoral reforms. None of them, because they were quite happy with the status quo. Now, in this particular election that is underway now, one party has said at least the need for simultaneous elections, but no other party has ever spoken or mentioned about the need for electoral reforms. Although, in all their speeches, they ask for so many changes to be brought about, but nobody has a rational presentation of the need for reforms. Now, what are the important issues? I know there are plenty of reforms suggested by various organizations, including the Election Commission, the Law Commission, and so on, in the Justice Venkatachalya Commission report, and so on. But I'll touch upon some important ones because of the time limitation. One of the things that at least I feel is urgently required is the regulation of political parties by a separate law of the parliament. In many countries, particularly Commonwealth countries, they have a separate law governing the functioning of the political parties. We do not have a law governing. We have a law for regulation of companies. We have a law for regulation of partnerships. We have a law for trusts and so on, the Companies Act and so on. But we do not have a law to regulate the function of the political parties. You know how many of them are there registered now? Almost 2,000 political parties are registered. Are they contesting the elections? No. Hardly about maximum 100 in terms of an estimate. They contest the elections. The remaining political parties, for certain benefits, they themselves register themselves, but they work as lobby centers and work for their own objectives, maybe for a particular section of the community or a particular economic group and so on. But one of the things that we need is to question the need for so many political parties. Before I joined the Election Commission, brought about certain restrictions in the registration of political parties, but the Supreme Court struck it down, saying that the right to form an association is a fundamental right. You cannot prevent political parties being formed. But even so, I feel there is a need for certain restrictions and regulations, because this kind of proliferation of political parties is certainly not a healthy situation. You can certainly form associations, but should they be political parties? Should they not contest elections? Should they not contribute to the electoral process? These are issues which need to be examined, and we should regulate the number of political parties. In most of the foreign countries, even in England, you have more than 100 political parties registered, although hardly about 5 to 10 political parties take actual active interest in elections. But this is one area where we need to do a lot of introspection. Then the political parties functioning themselves need to be regulated. For example, there are certain parties where the posts are almost monopolized by certain persons. There is no rotation of posts. There is no restriction of period for which a post has to be held. There was an attempt made by one of the political parties to make a lifetime president of the particular party. The election commission had to interfere. They had to ban and put in certain restrictions. The lifetime president was, the Supreme Court upheld the decision of the election commission. So the need for rotation of posts for the internal party organization, they need to be addressed. Then the financial management of the political parties. Well, this is a large issue. It includes the funding of the political parties as well. Mr. Trilochan Shastri mentioned about the electoral bonds. Even at the time when it was introduced, the electoral bonds, I took a public stand saying that it is not transparent and it is not desirable. I had said, in fact, I had used the word that it was a fraud on the people of India. And the Constitution, the Supreme Court upheld said those electoral bond scheme as unconstitutional. You see, one of the most important requirements of public governance is the political parties, when they are in power, even if they are out of power, they have to be transparent and they have to be giving an independent and efficient governance. But unfortunately, most of the political parties, not only in India, but in many Asian and African countries, there is no transparency at all. The Institute of Democracy and Electoral Assistance in Sweden has made a study of the functioning of the political parties. They brought out some publication in Sweden. And it's a very unfortunate state of affairs that there is a nexus between corporates and the political parties in many countries. And the system of funding the election is certainly not an ideal one. One of the suggestions I have made is that there should be a public funding of elections, and it should not be, the political parties should not be allowed to spend money on elections. There are countries where political parties are not allowed to accept donations. For example, in Canada, only the members of the party and the family members of the party, they could contribute to the funding of the elections, for funding of the party. But here, you saw the ugly display, particularly in the electoral bond scheme, how corporates have been vying with each other to fund the political parties. I don't want to go into those details, but what I wish to say is that the present system of funding of elections in India and in many Afro-Asian countries, they need to be changed. The obnoxious nexus between the corporates and the political parties result in distortions in policies of the government. And so the best, at least my suggestion, of course there could be other alternatives, is to make corporates and the individuals contribute to a national election fund, which could be given 100% tax exemption. And over a period of time, a fund has to be built, and it by a consensus of all political parties, the allocation of funds for the various parties could be done. I know there are difficulties, practical difficulties in that. There will be criticism, but we have to overcome that for the simple reason that political parties should be freed from the clutches of corporate donations. It applies to all political parties. I'm not singling out any particular political party. And it is desirable to do it quickly. Otherwise, I think the functioning, the public governance is bound to be affected in a substantial form. And having seen the functioning of the government at close quarters in Delhi, I can say that it is necessary that political parties should be banned from spending any money in the elections, and it should be only from the National Election Fund, which could be administered by the Election Commission, but its allocation will depend upon a broad consensus among the political parties. Regarding the financial management of political parties, I personally feel like companies, they should also be asked to disclose their accounts, if not once in a quarter, at least twice in a year, so that the public know how the funds are received and how the funds are deployed by the political parties. The Association for Democratic Reforms, of course, went on to the Central Information Commission to make the political parties public bodies and require them to disclose this information. In spite of the ruling of the Central Information Commission, none of the political parties has complied with this, and of course the matter has been taken up to the judiciary. But it is necessary that there should be a proper disclosure of accounts by the political parties. And as far as candidates selection, is again an area where we need a lot of discussion. At the moment, it is being done on the basis of a committee in each political party. And the main consideration is the person, whether he is able to provide funds and whether he is a dominant person in that constituency. The dominant can be caste, religion, or language. Depending upon that, they select the candidates. The main reason for this kind of selection is the fact that we follow what is known as first past post system, where a person can win even by a difference of one vote. There are instances where people have won with a difference of one vote. Not only that, there are instances where candidates have won only with 25% of the votes polled, even less than 25%. Whereas he is selected as a winner because of the first past post system. That person with 25% of votes polled represents the remaining 75% of the people who have voted in that particular election. Is that a really representative election? And these representatives claim that they are representing the will of the people. Absolutely, what should I say? It's a nonsense to say that they are representing the people with only 25% or less than 25% of votes polled. My suggestion for this is that the minimum we should insist on either 50% plus one vote polled as a threshold for winning. But if there is any difficulty in implementing it, at least insist on 33 and 1/3% of votes polled to be a threshold for declaring a candidate as a winner. Otherwise, we will only encourage small parties to thrive and to dominate. Sometimes small parties get even cabinet positions, even though they have won just because of 25% of or less than 25% of votes polled is the basis for winning. So it is necessary for us to bring this change. Otherwise, it is not only a non-representative government, but also gives room for hatred, violence, and inter-party rivalry and so on. So it is necessary. In fact, I would also go to the extent of saying that at least for the parliament elections, independents should not be allowed to contest the election. They should be brought under the discipline of a political party. Because you see now, particularly in the state governments, the independents play a crucial role in unsettling a stable government. And the system of government that we have, that, majority should be able to form the government, but then because of the alliances, different parties join together and form an alliance, but there is no coalition law. There's only a coalition. There's supposed to be a coalition dharma, but even that is very often violated. The alliances need to be given a statutory shape. For example, if an alliance comes to power, it should be made very clear that a person leaving that alliance will be disqualified for a period of 5 years or 3 years, so that such foolish games are not played by whims and fancies of some individual persons. So there is a necessity to regulate the formation and formation of government through alliances. Then inter-party disputes, you will find very often many parties, are particularly the major parties, they have disputes within the party itself, and then it is subject to the provisions of anti-defection law introduced in 1985. But then the speaker is the person, made the person to arbiter the dispute between the parties. And the speaker is often a member of the ruling party. And unlike the Western democracies, the speakers do not function in a neutral manner. As a result of this, the anti-defection law has become totally ineffective. There must be some changes which are required to be made. In particular, I would say that if a person leaves a particular party and he should not be allowed to hold any post in the government, even if that alliance comes to power, and that person should be disqualified to contest elections for 5 years. Such stern methods alone can prevent this kind of, footballing of the candidates and footballing of the ministers and so on. Then the other very important functioning of the political parties is providing freebies to the various voters. Here again, the matter went up to the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, Supreme Court did not give a firm decision. What they said was the Election Commission may have draft a suitable guideline in the matter of these providing freebies to the voters. My view is, if you are giving a freebie to a section of voters, not to a generality of the voters, that is nothing but corruption. And of course, we did argue. In fact, I did provide some points to Mr. Arvind Datar, who argued in the Supreme Court. But unfortunately, the Supreme Court did not give a direction, because the Election Commission doesn't have a statutory power to give such directions. And in my opinion, only public goods alone should be mentioned in the manifestos and promised, and they cannot provide freebies of the nature that is being provided. But if you really want to continue with that, at least some accountability should be there. And they must indicate how they will fund, whether they will resort to additional taxation or whether they will give up some of the existing schemes. These are all necessary to be mentioned in the manifesto or in the offers of these freebies, so that the voter gets educated before he votes. The model code of conduct is another. Do you have another 5 minutes, Mr. Vijay Kumar? 5 minutes more? Okay. The model code of conduct is another area where we have to bring in some changes. I would have liked to go into these details. In fact, I remember in one case, the party president and a party candidate used the state helicopters. For example, the Chief Minister of Punjab took a state helicopter up to the border of Punjab, and then he took a car from there to canvass for voters for the party in Rajasthan, which is a border state. We issued a show cause notice and we made the political party to pay the expenses of the helicopter from the state capital to the border, saying that he had violated the model code of conduct. So there are many instances of model code of conduct, but as the name suggests, it's only a code. It is not a law. Here again, we have made, at least I have made some suggestion that the Election Commission should have some statutory power to disqualify the voters or the candidates or even political parties if there are serious violations of model code of conduct. Otherwise, well, certainly the model code of conduct started well with good intentions, but you find so much of violence, hate speeches going on today. And this is one thing which I think we need to check. There are suggestions made. More than that, what is important is the political parties have to be brought into some kind of a discipline in this regard. And mere advice or mere warning is not adequate. For example, under the Model Code of Conduct, they can only say you cannot campaign for some time, or for that matter, you can, the political party is prevented from contesting the election for a particular period or something like that. But there is no statutory basis for any action of the Election Commission. The another point, though I have a few more points, electronic voting machines and simultaneous elections. I'll just take a couple of minutes on that. Electronic voting machines have been the subject of criticism from many political parties. It has a long history. Even when we introduced for the first time on an all India basis in 2004 elections, when I was the Chief Election Commissioner, we had taken enough safeguards, enough steps to see that it is not misused, it is not capable of any manipulation. In fact, I always call it as a nation's pride that these machines have been used. But unfortunately, the particularly political parties who are losing the elections, they find it easy to attribute that electronic voting machine has been manipulated. I can tell you, whatever arguments you may have against electronic voting machines, if you think that the ballot system is better, it's actually, in my opinion, it's a disaster if you use the ballot system, because we know many instances in pre-EVM days, how political parties used to stuff ballot papers into the ballot box, all bogus, printed separately. And particularly in some states, it has been very extensively misused. So please do not ask for old ballot system of voting. If you want some suggestions, ask for improving the electronic voting system, though I can confidently say that we have ensured that there are enough safeguards in the machine that it cannot be misused and manipulated. You know how some of the state parties have won the elections, and when they win the elections, they do not talk about the electronic voting machine. In fact, two persons of two political parties went up to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court asked them to prove that these could be manipulated. And thereafter, we offered an open challenge to political parties. Mr. Indiresan, who was the former director IIT, he was made the arbiter, and nobody came and could prove that the electronic voting machines. In fact, I talked to Mr. Indiresan, and he told me that he had asked 40 engineers to break open and find out some loophole in the machine so that we could at least find out something to say that it needs improvement. And he said it is absolutely foolproof. And with all this VVPAT which has been introduced later, I think we should put an end to this kind of controversy. And the political parties should at least accept now, with so many different parties coming to power, we cannot keep on questioning the credibility of these machines. Last is about the simultaneous elections. Recently, a report has been given by a high-level committee about the desirability of holding this election. And in fact, they have suggested that the 2029 election can be a simultaneous election. There are many issues there. Administratively and economic and financial terms, simultaneous elections are desirable. There is no doubt about that. But constitutionally and legally, how much it can be sustained is an issue which, of course, the lawyers and the courts will decide. But one thing I thought I'll comment on the desirability of some changes in the recommendation made by the high-level committee. They have said if the vote of no confidence is brought in a state legislature, even after it is through a simultaneous election, they have said that government will fall and you have to hold an election, which means you are not really holding a simultaneous election. You are going to have elections 1 year before or 2 years before the due date, and you will find some elections, particularly with the kind of the moral standard of our politicians, you will find more elections taking place in various states. But there is one suggestion made by one of the members, Mr. Subhash Kashyap. He has said we should bring in what is known as a constructive vote of confidence, which means if there is a vote of confidence motion brought in a assembly or in the particularly in the assembly, they should also elect a leader in that resolution. Otherwise, if a new leader is not elected, the vote of confidence will fail. That is the only way to prevent multiplicity of elections. And if Mr. Subhash Kashyap's suggestion is accepted, probably the simultaneous elections can be held. But on the constitutional issues, of course, as I said, the courts will decide. They have said that this change can be brought about by a mere voting in the parliament and without consent of the political parties. But this is, of course, a big issue, and it is only the court will give the ultimate ruling. Though local government elections, there was a reference to it by Mr. Trilochan Sastry. Yes, I agree there can be some kind of a standard and uniformity that can be brought about. But that would also require, though the high-level committee has recommended certain measures, I think it needs to be debated. It is desirable because we spend a lot of money and time over holding elections frequently, and much of the time is lost for proper governance. So it is probably some method has to be found within the existing recommendation so that all the local government elections are also held within a stipulated period and all elections are done simultaneously. But as I said, the legal and constitutional issues need to be sorted out. But as an administrator, I would say simultaneous election is good for the country. Thank you.
Okay, I understand. Being in a self-imposed exile, it was a pleasant surprise that Mr. Satyamurthy called me and said we are hosting a seminar meeting on electoral reforms. My instant reaction was, sorry sir, I'm not going to come. But probably he read my mind and he, without even waiting a breath, said Mr. Krishnamurthy will be here. So a fait accompli was presented to me. So I said readily, yes, if Mr. Krishnamurthy is here, at least to listen to him, I will be there. So very rarely we get the opportunity to listen to the sagacious wisdom and a man who has been at the helm of affairs. So thank you very much, Mr. Satyamurthy, MMA, for inviting me, and also, sir, to be sitting with you in the dais. It's a great honor and a pleasure. The word reforms is slightly a convoluted term, lends itself to multiple interpretations. And there is a presumption that we are deformed and we need to move to something better. Sometimes best is the enemy of the good. To move to a better position, we lose a good position. I think sometimes we should leave things as they are and take it up as it comes, not merely because we are capable of doing some reforms, we should do a reforms. We should think through several times over. I think the last 30 years, if there is one institution which has been a pride of India, it has been the Election Commission of India. I think we have to salute to the silent warriors who have been carrying on this exercise. I think there are more than 1 million electoral booths. Think of 1 million calculators being purchased and finally finding 4 calculators not working and then saying that the Election Commission is a dysfunctional organization. So I think the time has come for us also to say that Election Commission of India is the pride of India. But having said that, there are certain issues which I thought I will flag because after 2 stalwarts have spoken, they have made a lawyer speak much less. So you can understand how much they have spoken, how much valuable contributions they have made today. First thing I thought was alliance. I think the Election Commission must, you had mentioned that people who walk out of the alliance must be penalized. I think people who walk into an alliance must also walk in at least 3 months prior to the election date. And tentative date must be intimated by the election commission. We are going to have an election, say, declared by around 15th of March. So the cutoff date must be somewhere around January 15th or December 15th, something that we can work. It cannot be that suddenly Twiddly-dum suddenly comes and joins hands with Twiddly-dee and says we are in alliance. This I think is nonsensical. Just because it adds up to your arithmetic and you go to this party and this party says, sorry, we don't take you in alliance because we can give you 8 seats. The other party offers you 10 seats and you walk into that party and say we are in. So this I think is not a healthy democracy. Then once upon a time when, sir, you were in the income tax department, I'm talking about 30, 40 years when things were far more calm and cool. Every amendment used to come with the benefit given either to the taxpayer or the money that you would extract, at least in the aggregate party of the budget, would come and they would say that in the aggregate direct taxes would yield this much amount of crores of money, and indirect taxes we are giving so much of money, and on the whole I'll make so much money or I give so much money. I think we must ask every single manifesto whenever they come with any scheme, that what is the cost that you think you will impose on the exchequer and what you think and how you think you are going to fund it. This is a very legitimate expectation that we must bring in. This is a basic electoral reform. You cannot simply say, I'm going to give 10,000 rupees per head to everybody and say that this is what there was one per year. I'm talking per month, sir, my ability, sir. So there was one Federal Reserve chairman called Ben Bernanke. So when he was asked if America is going to meet with a recession, what he will do, he said, we will take a helicopter and drop money and we will come out of a recession. He was called Helicopter Ben. So we are having several helicopter Bens marketing the manifestos of various parties. Somewhere down the line, I thought this must be done. Mr. Satyamurthy talked about presidential form of election. Then I think Mr. Trilochan Shastri talked about hate speech. These are constitutional amendments. I don't think it's beyond the remit of election commission. We are talking only about election commission as to conduct election in a free and fair manner and draw a level playing field. Not only for intersect between the political parties, also between the voters and the political party. So I would rather say that larger issues like presidential form of election must be left to the constitutional amendment. I do not know whether the constitution lends for a presidential form of election because the basic structure we have to go to the Keshavananda Bharati. I was just wondering whether we'll have to go a 13-bench judgment has to review Keshavananda Bharati, in which case we have to review the entire basic structure. So it's a long haul. I don't think so. That is going to happen in a jiffy. Sir, your suggestion that at least 33% voters must get a positive vote. I remember in a small column somewhere in 80s, at that time 12.5% was the minimum to get back your deposit. Somebody voted only 11.5%, won the election. The question was whether the election commission has to give back the deposit or not. So that I faintly remember after you said this. But the question here is, sir, if I don't get 33%, there are as you said, there are 2,000 political parties. Now, in a constituency, there may be 5 or 6 headed people who may get 10, 12%. And I may get 25%. I may be declared winner, as you said. Now, what happens if you declare that constituency as non-est, as the election result non-est? What happens next? Are we going to have another round of election? Already we are having 40, 50 days of election. And think of again going back in the month of July to vote another round just because 80 seats, election not declared. And so parliament, we do not know whether who is in a majority or not, who will form a government. So I think first past the post. Okay. So I'm glad you are having some answer. I don't have an answer. But I would also suggest national elections to the Lok Sabha must be restricted to at least not more than 20 parties who have got at least 5% vote. At least you must have 5% vote bank in the state elections before you contest for Lok Sabha. Lok Sabha cannot be for every Lallu Panju party, as we say in Delhi. We would like to have that in Lok Sabha. If you are going to contest, you must be of some stature. Otherwise, you go through the graduation. You don't straight away, in CA, you don't write the final straight away. You write the inter, pass the inter, come to the final stage. Likewise, If you are going to contest, nobody is going to stop you. But prove your majority, at least get 5% of the votes or 3% of the votes. That can be a matter of debate. But the process has to start somewhere. I don't want to take name, but the neighboring state, after first round of elections were over, a particular audio-visual was released about a particular candidate. It's made nauseating. It's absolutely nauseating. Now, that type of candidate get elected. Not even one victim has come forward for filing a complaint. Now, I'm not saying Election Commission must do a Tarzan-like act, but somewhere down the line, pre-screening of candidates must also happen in the moral turpitude area also. It is not merely that FIRs are filed, you get conviction stayed, but there are several other complaints also, which are not lending to your criminal law. And these are things that probably a sexual harassment case may be more dangerous to have an MP as a sexual predator rather than somebody who has a PMLA case. I would see whether you have some answer to that. Then two more points with which I will close. The 3-member election commission strangely comprises only of IAS officers. In the sense, I have nothing against IAS officers. You are not one among them. But generally, it brings no variety to the table. In the sense, it can be management expert, it can be judges, it can be social workers. It need not be people who are administratively qualified. It requires people of integrity. The people of integrity is more important than of any administrative quality. This is not to say that IAS officers are disadvantaged in terms of integrity. No, not at all. But to put all the eggs in the IAS, and this government has been very keen that in almost every single institution you'll see IAS officers occupying. I have my own reservations, a diversity of thought, cross-fertilization of ideas, vividity, extraordinary experiences from cross professional fields can be drawn. I don't know why only IAS officers. Then in this country, we also have to understand between freedom and control, generally the society leans towards freedom. We are not an extraordinarily free society like America. But at the same time, when push comes to a shove between freedom and control, we always believe that it has to be towards freedom. So we have to believe that sometimes in trying to pull the 3-meter cloth and try to stitch a 3-piece suit is impossible. We just allow things to drift. And we are a very, very talkative society. We are extraordinarily informative society. We pass information. It may not satisfy your taste. That's entirely a different thing. But we are a debating society. We debate. 400 channels are constantly debating every single move of every single politician. Sir, can you believe the type of scrutiny that every single politician undergoes? Today, if he scratches his nose, there is a meaning attributed. If he doesn't scratch his nose, there is a meaning attributed. So we are a very extensively debating society. Let it not be controlled only by the Election Commission. Let the pravaham happen. Let the flow of information go on, and society will find its own balance. Let us have a belief in the society, in the belief in the ability of the society to control certain things. Lastly, I want to put two things to you, sir, and probably you are the fittest person to answer this. There is an voter apathy also. The voter apathy is basically because probably you see the same face for 20, 30 years. And you almost predict what these parties are going to say or these leaders are going to say. We are seeing even cities like Chennai, Bangalore having voting percentages of 50%, less than 50%. South Bombay this time had polled less than 45, I'm told. So it's voter apathy is absolutely palpable. I thought of two things that we must think about. One is to link Aadhaar card to the voter ID. This can be done and this must be done. This will weed out enormous amount of bogus Aadhaar card and bogus voters list also. I do not know why this is not happening. This is something that must happen in digital India. People pride on so much of interconnected information amongst various of our personal details. Aadhaar card linking to voters ID must be a demand. Probably MMA must, at least the barest minimum, must be made to the Election Commission. At least the next round of election that we may have, 2026, it must be done. I see enormous value in this. No, you can make a, sir, no, 1 minute, let me complete that. Parties won't have done, so many things parties will not agree, sir. So we are not here to decide what the parties must do. We must decide on what we must do as civil society. That is why we are here. Lastly, about one thing I was not clear about the electoral reforms of having, one nation, one poll. Suppose a state government forms goes to poll along with the center, and the government is not formed. For the next 5 years, do you think that it will be under President's rule? This requires a constitutional amendment. Even if it is done, I think it will have to survive the challenge of basic structure. Second, more dangerous, center nobody is able to form. We are today in a position of stable government. In 90s, we were not, when probably you were there. And at that time, there was always the risk of unstable government or even, parties coming together, forming some khichdi government. Supposing that they could not form, how would then the nation react when the other states, do you think that the states also have to go another round of poll because there was no government at the center? These two questions are not clear from the One Nation, One Poll Reform Committee. I will stop here, sir. If you can also answer, I have spoken mostly for the people there rather than my mind, and I will stop here and listen to you.
Thank you, sir. Great insights. There's so much of the excitement among the viewers. This is the first time live. We got more than 3,000 viewers watching this program. That's why we've been showing it to you live, what's happening on YouTube, other. So our webinar, all put together, more than 3,000 people are watching. So I got lots of questions. I tried and put it because the subject is so interesting. People are really keen, as Mr. MR said. There are a number of questions that come, and I will address the question to respect. You would like to answer it from there, sir. I'll try and combine the question. If you are as brief as possible, then we can take as many questions as possible. So here's a question to Mr. Krishnamurthy, sir. Your take on functioning of the election commissions today, and is the present VVPAT-based system of EVM audit satisfactory level? I think you already answered this in your thing. You are very clearly made it perfect, actually. Then I'll keep telling wherever you not answer.
I thought I'll make a point on that.
Sure, please go ahead, sir.
Yesterday, the BBC radio, they interviewed me on this very topic about whether the Election Commission has maintained the previous standards and so on. So you have to appreciate that the Election Commission discharges their great responsibility. There are difficulties, it's a human institution, there may be aberrations, there may be certain errors in judgment and so on. But do not put the blame on the Election Commission. This is what I told them. You have to realize a massive exercise being conducted to elect at least about 100 million voters. Voters have to exercise the vote. You do not know, in some places they have to go on a horseback, camelback, sometimes on the elephant back, and so on. There are challenges. It is not that I'm not saying that we have 100% perfect elections. But compare our situation for our neighbors. Compare the situation with the Afro-Asian countries. I think we have an excellent record on conducting the elections. I do agree there are scope, but there is scope for improvement. There are areas where we can probably make some changes. But I'm sure there is no, malafide in this. The Election Commission has always been discharging its responsibility. There may be one or two members who may be taking a wrong decision or who may be biased. I'm not ruling it out. But don't blame it on the Election Commission. And the 3-member Election Commission has served reasonably well. I'll cover the point that Mr. Venkatesh mentioned, whether a non-IAS officer with that. In England, for example, the chairman of the English Election Commission was a BBC Director General. But the English Election Commission does not conduct elections. You'll be surprised. The Act although provides for conducting the elections by the UK Election Commission, only referendums are conducted by the Election Commission. It's a huge exercise. People with administrative experience certainly play a very important role. But I agree with him, over a period of time, the non-bureaucrats can also be drafted. They should be brought in. But we have to evolve over a period of time. But by and large, I think I don't know, I have written an article about the first election commissioner, Mr. Sukumar Sen. The kind of challenges he faced in conducting the election, I do not think a non-bureaucrat could have tackled it. The way in which he was an ICS officer, but the way in which he conducted the election, it is true, the election took place for 2 months. It had 60 phases of it. 2 months. 6 months. I think 2 months as far as I know, but 60 phases of election. It went on various dates. But the way in which he conducted, and there used to be a ballot box for each candidate. And these are the things, over a period of time we have improved. So I told the BBC radio people, do not blame the Election Commission. The Election Commission and the electronic voting machines have done a reasonably good job. If you have suggestions for improvement, yes, they are welcome. We should improve wherever it is necessary. But to say that the elections are not free and fair in a chaotic society that we have, I think it's very unfair.
Thank you, sir. In fact, you answered a couple of questions already. Like some people said, what's necessary for spreading the elections over 45 days? I think we answered. Here's a question to Professor Tirloshan Shastri. So, as a chairman of the Association for Democratic Reforms, what are the most pressing electoral reforms needed in India today immediately to be implemented? Is from one of our members from Mathur. There's also another question to you, Professor. What strategies can be employed to increase public awareness and participation in advocating for electoral reforms? One more I will add, which is relevant. So one of the members asked, can we, 85% should be the target set for election commission. Otherwise, they said the election commission should be penalized. And we should also penalize the people for not voting, linking it to Aadhaar and various other things. What's your view on this? Lot of suggestions which has come on making it mandatory for voting.
So I have too many questions, but I'll start with the first one about what are the most important reforms that are required. This is a personal view. I won't even say it's a ADR view. We feel that our goal and our vision is to get good government with good governance, which is delivering the proper services to the people based on the taxes that people of India pay to the government. For that to happen, we must have men of honesty and integrity. It's an old-fashioned word. It is not supposed to be used in public debate, but people of character and integrity. We have people with criminal cases, hate speeches, serious murder cases, crimes against women, sitting in parliament and assemblies. So the first reform that is required is, and this is not going to be liked by many people, but the court will decide ultimately, people with serious criminal cases should be disqualified from elections. And number two, immediately they should not be allowed to hold any minister's position in the government. The second problem facing this whole thing is because whatever system you have, presidential system, American system, French system, we got many suggestions by our eminent speakers also. We need to debate all those. But without people of character manning those systems, they will find a clever way of manipulating and vitiating and making a disaster of that. So this is what I would say. We are still trying to sweep the floor and clean the room. We are not talking about building a grand Taj Mahal or some great temple there. We are still sweeping the floor. That's what I would say is the first thing that would require. Your second question, the third question I remember is about the linking Aadhaar card and all these things. Yes. I think it's a very contentious issue. For the record, which Mr. Krishnamurthy will disagree with, we had filed a petition which we just about lost, saying that the EVM system need not be replaced, but it should be strengthened, and we had given several suggestions on that, but the court did not accept our suggestions. And the second question in middle was an important question which I have forgotten. You had said that there was a second question somebody had asked. After the most important reforms, which I've said should be clearing the
Is it what strategies can be employed to increase the public awareness and participation in advocating for electoral reforms? And he's also asked, as a chairman of the Association for Democratic Reform, what is the most pressing electoral reform which need to be done immediately, and where there should be some ways and means where the court takes of this very, very immediate as a important act and give the judgment on it?
Yeah, we have tried everything. I've already told you that. If you are got a charge sheet against you, you will not get a job as a class 4 peon in a government office, but you can become a cabinet minister. So there is a problem there. We need to sort that out. And if you say that for you, let's leave that alone. And you're saying that, what was the second question again, sir? You are repeating. What was the question that you had asked? Apart from most important reforms and the other one about linking the Aadhaar card, etc. There was another question.
Another question is, you have to put a target to Election Commission, the 85% should vote.
No. You have to about engaging the public. Actually, I personally from ADR side, we would like to thank the MMA. This is part of that process. I think in aware democracy is required. We have sometimes we take the Bhishma route. So Bhishma quoted Dharma when Draupadi was being disrobed. And that some people, elderly people and people of wisdom who are otherwise very honest, they feel that it is not my job to raise my voice and sully this thing. I think we need to move out of the Bhishma mode and move into the Krishna or Rama mode where you actually take action against people who are. So the leadership is missing. The youth are ready. The youth are actually getting misled by various politicians and hate speeches. But we have such a wealth of talented and wise people in this country, both from within the government and outside. We actually should form a association, a platform of all these elderly and wise people, and continuously seek their advice and ask them to speak to the youth and younger people of this country and raise their awareness. It's a long-term project, but it's a very important thing.
Thank you, sir.
And to start that immediately after.
Thank you, sir. Many more questions.
So I'm not very wise and not very old, but we will do that.
We'll come back to you again, sir. A lot of questions for you. Since over 3,000 viewers are watching, a lot of questions today as very, very special, very rarely we done. For elections, we do that. We are extending the Q&A session by another 10 minutes, but we'll try and accommodate as many questions as possible. It's an interesting question from one of the Sarvana Kumar who is here in the hall today. Interesting. Is it high time we go for online mobile voting from any part of the world, which two-factor OTP, Aadhaar and authentication? I mean, I will answer. Then you may have to provide a mobile phone to everybody because not that every Indian owns a mobile phone. Maybe anyone would like to add anything on this, maybe Amar?
No, it is just like this. We have still not settled the debate on electronic voting machine.
Yes.
We are already going to voting through electronic mechanisms. You think of the chaos that will happen. But incidentally, I can tell you, my faith in the electronic voting machine comes with a conversation I had with Mr. Krishnamurthy sir in the launch of the Madras airport. When I asked him a point blank question, sir, are they reliable? He said, take it from me, they are 100% reliable. I do not know whether you remember it, sir.
It's depending it all the time.
No, but this conversation you told me, but probably 20 years down the line, we can think about it.
As far as the internet voting, we did examine in consultation with IIT Madras whether we could extend internet voting. But the political parties had reservations because they said the privacy of the voting will be lost when you give the voting right. But I personally feel at least senior citizens, the disabled persons, should be given the option to vote by internet voting.
Including postal ballot.
You can build certain safeguards so that they are not, forced to take certain decisions at home in favor of their person or in favor of their party. But a reasonable safeguard is good enough to introduce internet voting for all senior citizens, disabled persons, uniformed services people, etc. So that their
Good,
and it will also lessen the load of the polling booths.
Good, sir. Great. So there's another question addressed to you, sir. Can you please provide examples? Can you please provide examples of successful electoral reforms implemented in other countries that India could learn from? And Is there any successful reforms done by other countries which India could learn?
I have one suggestion which is being followed in New Zealand. We have a lot of complaints about voter names missing. In New Zealand, they have got an excellent system, which I did consider introducing. Unfortunately, I didn't have the time to introduce. It says whoever comes to the polling booth saying that he is a voter in that constituency, you have a separate machine, allowed them to vote. When the election results are taken up, if the number of doubtful voters who have voted in the other machine, if it is less than the margin of difference between the winner and the loser, ignore them. But if the number of doubtful voters or voters who have claimed the rights to vote is more than the difference between the winner and the loser, go through all those votes and see whether they are genuine persons or not. And then use that. This is an excellent remedy, I thought. But I do agree, in a country of our size, it's not going to be easy. Suppose, say, I think in one constituency, it is claimed, I don't know how far it is correct, I think they are examining it, 100,000 voters have been eliminated. Whether it is right or wrong, I don't know. But the point is, if you introduce these kind of reforms, there will be more credibility in the system.
Yes, sir. It's a question addressed to Satyamurthy from Mr. Magalingam, is from the audience. He says, sir, every party candidate has 5 years to get himself known, not 19 days, you study only a day before the exam. What he meant is that the candidate who is contesting should continue to engage with his constituents all through the 5 years before he stand for the election. And it is not the fault that 19 days you have to get known. So, but many political parties only pick up the candidates who are very popular in the particular segment. This 19 days is applicable only to individuals. But you mentioned your thing. Yeah. You would like to add on anything to this?
See, by 19, I didn't mean 19 per se. That every candidate should have the adequate time for the people to get to know and to vote. My issue is not about giving them the freedom alone. That is one issue where I may differ with the panelists here. But the voters should know who the candidate is before voting, to an extent. Today, the system is such, over the last 25 years in particular, people vote because I move with the people at the grassroots level and all. They know only the symbol. They don't even know the candidate whom they are voting for, even name. Or the leader. In Tamil Nadu, for instance, you know the leaders I'm talking about at the national level also. They know 3 or 4 symbols, nothing more, nothing less. And in a when there are 18 or 20 candidates, they don't even know who else is contesting. Because of, there are no posters. You imagine a rural voter who is working 10 to 5, come back home at 7 or 8. He doesn't have an choice of knowing who the candidates are.
Good, sir. Now, actually, going back to what you mentioned, the Chief Election Commission also mentioned, we should have only recognized political party to contest.
No, I protest. We will have another debate.
Another day for discussion.
That's what I said. Other 2 panelists I mentioned.
I know it's a very tricky subject, but
it is not a tricky subject. Whether we are going to have a guided democracy or absolute democracy.
Correct, sir. Absolutely true.
So we will have it another section separately.
Good. So here's the question addressed to Mr. M.R. Venkatesh from Ganesh from Chennai. Sir, from legal perspective, what are the constitutional and legislative challenges in implementing the electoral reforms? Do you think there should be a time-bound action put in the constitution for Supreme Court to act on this? Not only Supreme Court, every court to act on this and deliver the judgment, whatever relevant to the electoral reforms.
The Supreme Court is not standing in your way of reforms, whatever you want. I'm sure Election Commission, if they want to carry out certain things, they are free to carry out.
Sir, why this question has come, Dr. Trilochan Sastry is also there. He also mentioned some of the issues are still pending with Supreme Court.
That is because Supreme Court by itself, it is nothing to do with electoral reforms. It is to do with judicial reforms. So you cannot...
Maybe Dr. Trilochan Sastry would like to add on to this.
You cannot compare one with the other.
I appreciate the anguish of the questioner that why the Supreme Court is not acting. But constitutionally, the Supreme Court cannot legislate and carry out reforms single-handedly, and it should not. Supreme Court responds to petitions by whoever it is, and based on that, they examine the petition and the constitution and take a very nuanced view and a correct view, mostly, on what reforms are required. Now, if you say, I have my dream list of electoral reforms and the Supreme Court shall implement it within 1 year, I don't think it is feasible. I would not put that burden on the Supreme Court. I don't know what Mr. Venkatesh thinks, but that is the view.
Sir, we go for two final questions, sir. One is Mr. Radha from Dindikal. He says, in what ways can electoral reforms address the issues such as money power, criminalization, and politics, and dynastic politics, and also freebies? Freebies, he says, there is the question put, the electoral party should prove how they are going to meet the expenditure of freebies and how budgeting to be done and how all this issue could be addressed. I will maybe request all the three of you to share your insights in quick 1 or 2 minutes so that we start with Chief Election our form. Yeah, Mr. Shastri would like to go first on this.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and usually these questions come from what I may call the middle class. The working class people that I work with, they don't seem to have much problem with all these freebies or all these kind of things. It has been examined by the Supreme Court, by the way. Not us, but some other groups have gone to the Supreme Court on freebies. And the Supreme Court has categorically said it's a matter of policy and we cannot interfere in these kind of issues. Now, I will ask a question to the questioner. In all countries around the world, including in India, primary education is subsidized. Almost free. Including in India and the United States, in government schools. I'm not talking about private schools, government schools. Is that a freebie? Okay, you may say yes, no. During COVID, giving 5 kg of rice, is it a freebie or an emergency measure? We don't know. Even now, if you are giving, is it a freebie? So, who is to decide whether it is a freebie or a legitimate policy? That becomes very difficult to say. I think it's the public alone which has to wake up. I'll just stop with one question. I do a lot of work with tribal farmers in Andhra. So, at that time, the competition in the assembly election was one party said that we will give 1 rupee rice free, 1 rupee rice, and another party said for tribals, it will be free rice. And one of the tribals, we work with tribal farmers there, he said, sir, it is chala tappu. In Telugu, what is this? It is very wrong. It should not be done like. I said, why? He says, we are farmers, we are workers, we are not beggars. We should not be getting this free. So the public has to understand and that awareness in the public has to come. Only then these freebies will be under control. That's, in Tamil Nadu you say, Sui Maryada and Kandiyam. My Tamil is not very good. Self-respect and dignity. No, but these are very powerful words. The whole Dravidian movement was based on these 2 words. That Rosham, that kind of self-respect and dignity of the people, people like us have to arouse so that they say, no, we are not beggars. That sort of a thing people have to start saying. It's a long haul, but it's worth doing. So I'll stop here.
Mr. Krishnamurthy would like to add on this. Freebies is a very serious issue.
We have been suggesting for a long time some legislative measure to prevent the heinous criminals from contesting the elections. This must be addressed. There is no doubt about it. The second point I want to mention, I think, arising out of what Mr. Venkatesh mentioned, there is an impression that the Election Commission has all the powers to conduct the elections free and fair. Please remember, we are guided mainly by the Constitution and the Representation of People's Act. Of course, there is a decision of the Supreme Court in Manoj Singh Gill versus Union of India, Election Commission, I think, or Union of India. It says that whenever there is a legislative vacuum, the Chief Election Commissioner cannot throw up his hands in despair and appeal to God. He has to take decisions which are fair, which are in spirit of the Constitution and the laws of the land. So there is a certain amount of discretion available, but in a place where there is a legislative vacuum. But where there is no, for example, the qualification or disqualification of a candidate, the Election Commission cannot act on its own. It needs certain legal support. So there are areas where amendments should be brought about. There are areas where constitutional amendments may be necessary, but at least 50 to 60% of the suggestions made by the Election Commission can be carried out by a simple amendment to the Representation of People's Act. Unfortunately, all the political parties, I emphasize all the political parties, have not taken seriously this possibility of amending, at least where there is general consensus, amend the Representation of People's Act. But there is no consensus, and I don't know whether the consensus will ever arise. But the ruling party with a majority can go ahead and implement some of these suggestions.
Lovely, sir. A lot of questions have come, even some questions have come. Why this time the Election Commission not acted against certain complaints pulled by? They're all political. Since the election is on, we are guided by the thing. One last question to Mr. MR. Maybe you would like to do that. Even others would like to answer this question. We'll be more than happy. What are the potential drawbacks or unintended consequences of certain electoral reforms, and can they be mitigated?
There's two philosophical
unintended consequences of certain electoral reforms.
Consequences of electoral reforms.
The consequence of electoral reforms to be carried out.
Yes.
Certainly it will improve the quality of democracy. There is no doubt about that at all. In fact, good reforms can bring rich dividends. Bad reforms, of course, I only hope
nobody can.
The only one which probably had a very unsatisfactory end is the electoral bond scheme. But most of the reforms, thanks to that Association for Democratic Reforms and the Supreme Court, most of the reforms have been very constructive and they have been useful. But there are still areas where even Election Commission as well as other law commission, etc., have suggested. I think the political parties should realize the urgency for these reforms. As I said at the beginning, reforms are necessary. They will improve the quality of democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause. And Dr. Tirulokhan Sastry, thank you for joining us. You are separated by distance. We got a special digital memento for you, sir. Can I have the digital memento of Professor Sastry? And next time when you come, we would like to, on your behalf, we'll be presenting to underprivileged children the books, because people like you come and speak in MMA. That's where I think we have over 3,000 plus viewers watching this program live on various channels of MMA. Thank you, Dr. Sastry. And next time we have to get you over to speak. I know your authority on Mahabharata and ancient wisdom. It will be a pleasure to have you and host you here. May I also request Satyamurthy and former Chief Election, Mr. Krishnamurthy and MR to step forward. And Sundaram, can you also join as member of Managing Committee to present a memento? We'll give you only more book to read, sir. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Till we meet again. Bye-bye. Good night. What proves today is if you have a good subject, large number of viewers watch the program. And thanks for your support. It is a privilege to have you with us today. Get back home safely. Good night.